and welcome to the Roll Wise Show, where we talk about all things tabletop role playing and some extra stuff. If you like the conversations that we have and you want to hear more of it, please help us out by liking, subscribing, sharing, and/or commenting, because we really want to hear what people that are doing in the hobby, how they react to the kind of conversations they have, sharing their own stories, and all that kind of stuff. So don't be afraid to say hi in the comments, and we'll chat with you down there too. So today we got really just two topics. We get to talk a little bit about Chris Perkins and his retirement, and we get to talk about like how all of a sudden the gaming industry just got upended and in ways that probably are unpredictable and very confusing, and will have long lasting impacts. Um, but I think we need a caveat beforehand. We're not a politics show. We're not a politics talk show. We're not really here to really discuss some of the that we don't really want to sit on either side of the fence there. We're just going to talk about tariffs and some games that we think have low barriers to entry. So if you're looking for something new but you're scared to spend money right now because of all the uncertainty, we got some suggestions for you. So sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So Chris Perkins, retirement, 28 years at Wizards of the Coast. I don't know. Did you guys really follow Perkins throughout his career, or did you kind of like hear about him more recently? Where were you guys out on the fence there?
I only know Chris Perkins as the guy that ran the D&D game for the Penny Arcade guys. That was when that's
Can
basically how I know him. And
Oh,
then I
really?
saw him recently and I was like, oh, hey, it's that guy. And that's about all the recognition I have for Chris Perkins. I recognize the name from the books, but
Hmm.
Yeah, same here. I recognize the name from the books.
Yeah.
I was not aware of all of his contributions, but obviously he was there, and then he was suddenly working on core books instead of tertiary products,
Hmm.
right? Because didn't he start off writing adventures,
he
something like
started
that?
off writing for Dragon Magazine, Adventures for Dragon Magazine, apparently. I think Dungeon Craft has a little blurb on his history with Wizards of
Yeah.
the Coast.
No, I honestly can't say that I knew much about Chris Perkins. Obviously a name that is on the interior cover of a lot of the books. When you look at the credits, you're like, oh, there's Chris Perkins. But investigated, like I didn't know that he had done. I think it was called Acquisitions Incorporated, with Penny
That was the
Arcade,
Penny
as
Art,
well
yeah.
as
Yep.
a few other things. But I was kind of curious. I mean, a person who's been in the industry for 28 years, and especially when they've worked at Wizards of the Coast for that long of a period of time, and how long they've been just in the hobby. I was curious, like what kind of storied history that he would have, and it's been pretty amazing. I mean, first of all, I mean, he was working on he did work on Dungeon Magazine, and he did have that original adventure. I actually went to Dungeon Magazine number 11 and looked at it, and it just reminds me of how different people approached the game. It had I mean, it was, first of all, it was a tournament style. I don't know if you guys have heard that term, but like a tournament style game where it had like scored points based on how you
Yeah,
ran the
Oh, it was when they were doing the living D&D or whatever it was called, where
I think it was before
yeah.
that because it was written in 1988.
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
yeah, it was like, I mean, I think this was like 1988 is when it first came out. So, I mean, I think he was in college at the time, and he wrote this thing, and it showed a fair amount of maturity. I only skimmed through it just to kind of see the way that it looked out and everything like that. But it has a scoring table at the end so that when you run it at a con, you can get a score, like a high score. You know, you get like a +1 to the team if a gate is open quietly, -1 if anybody drinks a liquid or something like that. And so like they're all assigned to areas. So without getting too spoilery, I just forgot about those types of games that people
Yeah,
used to
it's
play at tournaments
interesting.
because I have not played anything like that in so long. Usually it's like, did you figure out the point of why we were playing or didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, there was I know this came later, but I mean all of the big cons always had, I forget what the
Mhm.
group was called, but like you could kind of level up as a player playing in these convention games where they were scored. Like you could also do stuff at home. So there were people that did it. They were
Mhm.
generally, I would say, more Midwest and East Coast because they're closer to the larger conventions.
Hmm.
There isn't a ton of large gaming conventions on the West Coast historically.
Yeah, I have heard events like that where people scored points and like you could run awards. I remember that. a couple different points. So yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And
So
certainly in a place like Montana, we didn't see anything.
No,
well, like, obviously, everyone's just like Montana where for conventions. So it was kind of cool, to see that, he started writing for the magazine, became an editor for the magazine, and then just kind of like had a lead into Wizards of the Coast back in the late '90s. Um, I was actually curious because, as you said, Brent, he did run a couple live plays, and from what I was hearing from other places that described his contribution to live plays, is he kind of created the template and worked with Critical Role on the whole first campaign that they did. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting because I mean, as you said, Acquisitions Incorporated. He had like another live play. It was ready. Now I don't remember off the top of my head. Whatever, that's okay.
yeah, I don't remember another one. I mean, I'm sure
There
he's
was a
done some.
Well, it had like 141 episodes. It had like
But just
what
a
the
small
hell?
one.
It was a small live play. It was called Dice Camera Action.
Oh
That's
yeah,
I
what it
actually heard
was.
of that.
Yeah, they
I
had
never
it. They have it
saw
on
it, but
Twitch, and I guess you could actually watch all 4 seasons on Twitch, maybe. So
probably.
there was definitely a huge amount of content if you want to watch. And I know that at least the first episode or the first bit was dealing with like the Curse of Strahd, which he worked on as a creative individual for. So kind of cool. The only other thing that I thought was really neat was that back in the early 2010s, he was also writing dungeon master advice in the context of like he was using like his own homebrew world and everything like that. And there's actually dozens and dozens of his posts available online about how to be a better DM. This is the kind of stuff that they were talking about, like kind of just sharing his thoughts and everything. And somebody actually compiled it into a PDF, which I think would be kind of cool to pick through and see if there was some stuff
Cool.
we wanted to dive in deeper. Because I mean, he's fairly. I mean, it seems like he's a fairly knowledgeable individual about this stuff. Like honestly, he was the reason I thought even about buying the new Dungeon Master's Guide was the way he talked about it and kind of the principles that he had put first with how to teach people to be better DMs and stuff. So
yeah,
And now,
I,
and now he's part of the Wizards of the Coast exodus.
yeah, I mean, I don't really know what that means. Like the fact that he's leaving right now,
Well, I mean,
but it
it's not just
well,
him. It's been like several executives. Like after he announced his leaving Wizards of the Coast, another guy, I can't remember his name, announced that he's leaving as well.
let's be
yeah,
honest. Let's translate this to corporate speak. You get high enough up in a company like that to where
mhm,
you understand that you're not going to be the next guy tapped to be the main person, right? You're not going to be the next person chosen. You have
mhm,
two choices. You find a new thing on your own, and then you
yeah,
retire gratefully from this thing and then show up somewhere else in 3 months, or the company decides that they don't want you around anymore and they give you the choice to retire, or they'll just eliminate your position and create a new one of an equal thing and give it to somebody else. Like that's the only thing that happens in corporate America. It's one
yeah,
of those two things as you get into that squeeze near the top.
yeah. And honestly, I
Right.
don't know enough about the history to say personally whether he was forced out or whether he chose to,
Sure.
or maybe he saw the writing on the wall. Like it seems like D&D as a brand has been really struggling, and
I
I
think
mean
Wizards is just in a weird place,
it.
um,
Well, it is. I
and
think
not
priority
sure what they
wise,
want to do with it. So
Well, yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we've talked before. Hasbro seems to have ideas that they think are easy and cheap to implement that aren't
Hmm.
easy or cheap to implement.
Yeah,
Like the virtual gaming table that's more like a video game that turned out to be much harder to develop and much more expensive than they thought it was going to be.
yeah,
Everybody wants to be Blizzard Entertainment until they realize you got to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to develop a product
mm,
before you ever sell it. You know what
that's
I
true.
mean?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't
and
know.
I would have at least loved to see the fully realized virtual tabletop for D&D. I mean, it seemed like it could have been pretty cool, but
There were
honestly,
things I liked. There were things I was like, that's an interesting choice.
well, you are seeing the fully realized product that they produced.
It's been
No,
scrapped.
I'm talking about the one that was sold to me, not what was delivered to the thing, because it sounds like that has some stuff, but I mean, it's just, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like imagine having something so dead on arrival that it just doesn't enthuse anybody to, start looking into it or playing with it or anything like that. It's just like, what a waste. What a waste. But we're not here to talk about that. I think that it's
No,
cool that Chris Perkins, had such a long and storied career with Dungeons and Dragons, and I really feel like even though I kind of missed seeing a lot of those things, because I really wasn't maybe gaming in the early 2010s because we kind of taken our break ourselves then. I think it would be good to go back and see and kind of remember some of the things that he's done and kind of see where he was at those times because it sounds like he was a font of knowledge, and I think for my own journey, I'm more than happy to
honestly,
see what that.
watch the Acquisitions Incorporated stuff.
They're pretty entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're pretty entertaining. I'm gonna say this. I know that for some people he's a really polarizing figure, and honestly, love him or hate him, he traded part of his life for dollars, right, to help shape a hobby that we all love, for a game that we've all played a lot of.
Hmm.
And I thank him for his efforts. I probably didn't agree with everything that he decided, but if the roles were reversed, he wouldn't have agreed with everything I would have ultimately had to decide in trying to further the game. So I appreciate his 28 years, and I wish him well on his future endeavors.
Yeah, it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see what he does from here because there's a lot open to him
mhm,
in the state of role playing games these days that wouldn't have been a few years ago. Like whether or not
yeah,
he starts his own actual play, like Critical Role, or where he goes from here, what new game he designs. Like other people that have left have. So it'll be interesting to see.
yeah. I mean, it's the sky's the limit. I mean, I don't know. It is going to be fascinating to watch, and I think what we will follow up when we hear his next project, or if he does one. I mean, you never know.
He may
I
not.
mean, 28 years out in the spotlight, he might just want to play D&D or another game of his choosing once a week with some close friends, and then just sit on the beach drinking whatever he drinks, water, mai tai.
Or,
It's fine.
become a bookkeeper or a woodworker or, something else and stay out of the limelight.
Just carving on some wood when somebody comes, Chris, we need advice, and he's like, let me put this away. I did think it was awesome that like you could see Chris and throughout his life he always had that black hat on. Um, yeah, that was pretty funny. I saw some interviews and stuff like that. But so yeah, so that's Chris Perkins. So apparently right now the second topic is a little heavier because it is about how the hobby itself is going to be going undergoing some turmoil. Like no matter what, like I don't think there's an escape from the kind of the storm that is happening economically around everything in America. And just so everybody's clear, we are based in America. I know we may not seem like it.
I think we've mentioned where we're from before, so
Whatever. Yeah, so we are based in America, so we get to, when we turn on the news and we turn on our updates, we get to see all this kind of stuff happening. And I thought it was interesting because I feel like when everyone kind of talked about how the tariffs were, coming like going to start, and when they were basically they were beginning, like it felt like pretty much the industry decided that the sky was falling based on all the all the stuff that I was reading online. But I mean, do you guys know what tariffs are? Or have you heard like the explain it like I'm five version of what a tariff is and all that stuff?
I feel I understand tariffs, but
yeah. But go
give
ahead.
us the explain it like I'm five version.
Well,
Since there is a
so
lot of confusion. No, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of rhetoric being thrown around as to
mhm.
what they are and who ultimately winds up paying for them, and whether or not they actually work the way you think that they work.
Yeah, and and honestly, there's gonna probably be examples of tariffs that I'm not familiar with, because I used to work for a manufacturing company that imported a lot of tools from Asia, whatever. Imported a lot of tools to America because it was easier and cheaper to buy tools abroad and bring them in rather than manufacture them here. But when we had to go through this stuff back in the 2016 versions, when there was a kind of a, I wouldn't say it was a less aggressive tariff schedule and everything like that that happened. But basically, what a tariff is it's pretty much putting a duty on goods being imported into the country. Now, when we say stuff like who's paying the who's paying for this, well, the person importing the product is paying for it. And so, like when I was working for my company, we were the ones importing the product from our manufacturing plants in China or whatever it was. And so we would, once it reached the port of LA or wherever it was, we would cut a check, and then we would take the goods, and it was be based on the assessed value of the goods and everything like that. And when that just kind of gets baked into business, all of a sudden now we have a different price to produce the goods because it's now that tariff becomes part of the price to produce that good, right? Like that's the part I think people need to understand is that it doesn't really matter what the original cost is because that's no longer the only arithmetic that the business is taking into consideration. Because then when we resold it to whatever box stores or whatever it was, then they took that into their price calculations, and then when they presented it to the consumer, they took that into their price calculations. And so when we talk about it from like a tabletop role playing thing, it's the same thing. I mean, if you print your books in China or you print your books in the EU or Canada or whatever it is, if they're subject to a tariff, they're going to be more expensive. It doesn't really matter. What I think sucks about this though is that as a small publisher or something like that, I can only imagine that small publishers really don't get a lot of margins on there.
Right. Gaming has a small margin, and the other issue is, and I heard about this from another video. I think it may have even been Dungeon Craft again who said it. Is like one of the businesses that one of the models that's going to have a problem is those people whose books are on a boat right now, coming over from
Mhm.
like a Kickstarter or something like that. When they get delivered, you're going to be whatever percent higher you have to pay them than what you calculated into your, like, you already have your finite amount of money that you got from your kickstart.
Mhm.
Well, it's going to be, you're going to have to pay more now when it
Mhm.
lands than you calculated for. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be a problem for some of those smaller manufacturers that can't eat that extra cost that they weren't ready
Well,
for.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And they've
imagine having a
also
really Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say they've also already received payment on a Kickstarter
Exactly.
from the people that I don't want to get into legalese here, but there's a contract, at least an implied contract in that transaction, and the consumers paid a finished price, including shipping already.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like you said, the companies can't. They baked in a 10 or 20% tariff, and
Mhm.
now it's spent from China 104%.
Yep. Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
Like you can't. y- that's a huge increase in your bill. So yeah, it's it's
so
it's it's
it
nuts.
sucks. Yeah, and but the good news is that tariffs well, the good and bad news is tariffs are incredibly complicated. Like without getting into the reason for justifying tariffs, like tariffs can be surgically applied, and how it worked for us at least is that every product that we had a harmonization code, and so those products could be excluded based on the harmonization code. So if we classified something as a specific thing, and that wasn't on the tariff schedule, that could go through the customs, because that wasn't on the list. And if the well, I should say if the border patrol people also agreed it was this is where lawyers and experts and everything like that help you classify your goods, because if you classify it one way and then the border patrol doesn't agree, then you're still fucked, whatever. But it seems like at least at this point, according to the most recent list of codes that they exempted, RPG books are exempt from the main tariffs, like the biggest increases and everything like that, and especially since there's a pause. But since we're kind of in a whirlwind of you know a whirlwind of tariff, no tariff, tariff, no tariff. This video could be out of date by the time we post it.
right. The
Yeah.
other thing I think the other thing I think is a concern for smaller companies. They don't have lawyers that can look into this. Is like the companies that you're talking about that we read about, and I read the article that you were. I don't remember who posted it, but the article, like Modifius, and there was one other company that's fairly large.
Mhm,
Oh, Rowan Rook and Deckard. Those two companies were worried less because they have lawyers that said, well, that doesn't really fall under
mhm.
it falls under an exemption because they're books and they don't care that they're game books, they're just books.
Mhm.
So it doesn't really matter, so it doesn't really impact us. But like there's smaller companies that don't have lawyers as knowledgeable as say a company as big as Modifius or Rowan Rook and Deckard, and so that's I think one of the causes for the panic.
Well, and I mean, I can only imagine having to hire someone to help you navigate your classification to make sure it's appropriately classified when it's being imported from your shipper. And you know what I'm saying? Like, just to make sure all your ducks in a row, because you'd hate to be penalized or worse, lose product because it had to be destroyed in port because it was falsified or something like that. But the other part that I thought was, but I think the damage necessarily isn't from the fact that it's exempt and everything like that. I think the bigger damage is going to be like everyone's going to tighten their belt and close their wallet for a short term period, because I hate to say it, but this is a hobby. This is a kind of a luxury expense.
Mhm.
So whether or not the books were going to be more expensive, or they still will be more expensive, or you can't get the accessories you wanted, everyone's going to look at this and kind of be like, I need to know what's happening before I, you know, buy another Kickstarter, or before I buy that book at the store again. That's going to be the real impact for people that are not like us
I
doing a weekly show on it.
I think you'll see a bigger shift you'll see the shift to PDFs again, where people
Hmm.
aren't buying physical books as often because PDFs they don't
Well,
require
as
as much
yeah,
production.
as of now, there's no tariffs on PDFs.
Right.
Yeah.
Although, as soon as somebody points that out, maybe somebody will decide that they can try to leverage stuff that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of insidious things, like especially small publishers,
Hmm.
people putting out really innovative products,
Hmm.
but in really small print runs, they can't take the hits to their cost of goods the way larger companies can. Like I poop on Hasbro a lot, but Hasbro is well positioned if they didn't sell any D&D books for 2 years because of the tariffs, which is not going to happen, but they could take the hit. Their
Well,
shareholders wouldn't like it, their board wouldn't like it, but they wouldn't go out of business.
I don't think
But
they really care about physical book production anymore either. They want people to buy D&D
sure,
Beyond and digital
right,
product.
but
So
still,
this is probably in line with some of
yeah,
their
the,
business plans.
there's other things like, further down the line as this plays out, however long it plays out. And I am very much in favor of the companies and the publishers, but there are very few industries that have absorbed price increases
Hmm.
where when the reasons for those price increases went away, the prices went all the way back down to what they were. So
Yeah.
let's just say an RPG book right now is $50, okay? Just to throw out a number. If suddenly everybody starts accepting that it's $75 because of tariffs, and everybody gets used to paying $75 for an RPG book, for a core
Mhm.
RPG book, even if the tariffs go away, I don't think the price goes back down to 50. I think
Maybe.
a lot of the companies it'll
Yeah.
be 55, 60, 65. They'll be like, no, we reduced the price, but we've got all these other costs that have gone up. And that may even be true. I'm
Mhm.
th- Most industries, once consumers have learned to accept a higher price, there's not a lot of reason to ever lower it again.
Yeah, and that's, there's two points that can be made here, which I thought was a fascinating thing. In one of the conversations about tariffs is that, so like, one of the, because there's a few reasons why you use tariffs, to protect your industry, to build revenue, prevent dumping. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of tariffs to prevent dumping of certain products into a market that kind of flood the market and put certain, like, your own national companies out of business and stuff like that.
Right.
But the interesting part about it is that, like, let's say we, use a currently tariff thing like aluminum from Canada. Well, all of a sudden, you put a 25% increase on the aluminum, aluminum from Canada, and now that, American steel manufacturers that produce aluminum are also now just jacking their price up 20%, because that's now the new market rate. And to your point, unless there's economic reason to go back down, it's just that curve, right? Wherever your demand is and wherever you maximize your sales on that curve,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to set the price at. So, there is a point in which, like, let's say your books are $75 and you don't sell any books. So you have, either you can't make your money back, or you have lots of inventory you're sitting on that you need to sell. Then you just scale back the price. And if your books start moving, then you find that minimum price that you can sell at, right? And then you hope that you can go back up to that other price. But, companies don't like to lose money. So they're, if they can
They
get that
don't.
higher price out of it, they're going to.
And
And
if
I did think it
if
was
you're only making
interesting.
a couple of products a year,
Mhm.
like you can't afford this. Like it takes already thin margins and makes them thinner or non-existent. Like
Wha-
the impact of small publishers, if this is drawn out, is like if you I've seen a lot of people more from the board game side than the role playing game
mhm.
side. but I did see Steve Jackson talk about it from Steve Jackson Games.
Yeah.
Uh, s- we may see a ton of small publishers just go belly up. Just
They
Well, I
should.
think that's
weird.
the fear. I think that's the fear.
That's the fear.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because either A, they can't, put themselves in a position where they get products out at a cost that they can manage. B, consumers just start buying less, and that means that there's less money in the pot for them to get, you know, and or other things like their current stuff just puts them,
Well, I
they
mean,
get.
the real concern is that like no company in the RPG space is that big, really, other than
Mhm.
No, it is a
that's
small, it is
that's
a
the
relatively small industry compared to
that's why there's
all
this
other industries.
that's why there's this sky is falling mentality is because there's
Yeah.
not very many big publishers that can weather this increase.
So did you see on the N World where there was the publishers were saying it and stuff like that? I did find it fascinating because there was definitely like the publisher for Coyote and Crow. They were like, this is going to kill my company and the game industries. Okay, that sucks. But like Evil Baby Entertainment, they were talking about how they charge creators unanticipated fees, they cover the cost and everything like that. And he stated in his statement, rest assured, my backers will not be charged any additional fees. I will eat the cost of the tariffs myself. Not going to lie, that's going to hurt, but we had a deal. So that's very good. I mean, most
And
businesses might say, business wise, maybe not the best deal for him, but that's a very noble and, like true to his word kind of thing. But the Arcane Library for Shadow Dark, they said, the current tariffs, severe as they are, we're not going to impact pricing or deliverability because we already planned for it. So good foresight for them. Honestly, they already have that baked into their Western Marches Kickstarter that they had. So I think there's a lot of maybe new creators that were getting their first Kickstarter out that didn't even think about that
Well,
as a
yeah,
possibility.
I'm sure.
oh, I'm sure some people didn't. There's going to be a wide variety of responses. I have
Mhm.
seen on board game Kickstarters at this point. I've seen some people talking about passing along some of the costs. I've seen a couple. I don't talk about potential refunds if you really can't afford, you know,
Yeah.
to help out with another $10 or $15 on the shipping. Um,
Mhm.
I but they've already spent most of that money. That's the thing. That's the reason that they're kickstartering in the first place. They didn't
Yeah.
have X amount of dollars to front the production costs of the whole thing, right? You get prepaid for this product because you didn't have the money to do it yourself. That's why it's called crowdfunding.
Mhm.
You're actually raising funds, and having to do lots of refunds costs you even more than eating some of the tariffs in some cases.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. It would be a horribly unpredictable time to be a producer or a publisher right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, when you looked at that N word article, Mike, did you look at the people who've talked about trying to produce things in the United States?
Mhm.
Like it seems
Well,
like
yeah.
right now the U.S. has some expertise on producing cards. So like
Mhm.
for collectible card game type things or game cards, or cards. There's some role playing adjacent cards, right?
Yeah.
Hasbro used to produce spell decks and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I get cards with my free league stuff, so they obviously
Yeah.
there are
So
cards.
so yeah,
It just depends on the
there's
gimmick the games
yeah.
provide. So
Mhm.
We don't have as much expertise though in dice and resin and board
Mhm.
game
Those
cards,
those are going to be problematic. I'm pretty sure.
and
I think
we also
plastic
don't have the
products are.
expertise in having the actual machines because
yeah,
most of those are made overseas, and now there's tariffs on those. Even if you wanted to set up a manufacturing plant,
yeah. Well, and this is something that people may not realize is that like even if the tariffs were stayed low, right? I mean, or it achieved a goal of moving manufacturing stateside, where we actually started having people opening up printing houses that did these kind of things at a scale that could support the industry. The company I worked for, still had to source all of the materials
right?
for the products globally, right? Because there
Yeah.
just isn't the product available in the US to get the resin, get like, I mean, they're like who makes the batteries for what you need? Who so in the
Right.
case of books, like where do you get the ink? Where do you get the glue? Like, I mean, unless you build cottage industries for every aspect of those and you can get everything in America, which would make it just fantastically expensive. I mean that you still run into these problems that like prices are still like it doesn't solve the problem just to open up a print shop in America is all I'm trying to get at. Because the price
Right.
that you'll
No,
see
it doesn't.
is still gonna be high, higher than you
No,
expect.
the board game publishers that I saw that
Mhm.
claim, okay, this is third hand accounts, right? But I don't
Yeah.
see why they would lie. Uh, the few places that can produce those types of things in the United States are approximately 6 times more expensive than the average place in China.
Mhm.
So if it costs $20 to produce in China, it costs $120 to produce in the United States. So if you're ultimately producing a $60 or $70 game, you're producing a $400 game if it's done in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and that's but I mean, I hate to take the side of the business, but that's why, when the barriers are down and you can manufacture abroad and you can get those cheap
Right.
prices. Ooh.
And even if you agreed to produce your game for $400 in the United States, you couldn't hardly get on the schedule, for the
Mhm.
next 3 or
Capacity,
4 or
yeah.
5 years. Yeah, capacity isn't there at all. There's
Mhm.
no excess capacity because they were already operating close to full anyhow.
Yeah, because I mean,
Like it's a
that's the thing that people don't understand is that manufacturing plants don't just operate at like 10% and they're like, all orders come in. No, if
yeah,
they're operating as close to capacity as they can.
yeah. So for small industries like this, like the worst case scenario is almost scorched earth. Like especially for the creatives. Like even if the publisher stays, by
Mhm.
selling back inventory and stuff, they're not producing new things and the writers and the artists aren't getting paid anything and they've got to go find new jobs and, new careers doing other things because the companies that they were contracting with, a lot of them have worked for years. They can't afford to pay you for your work.
Yeah. Yeah. So needless to say, from our perspective, I think my perspective at least is that if you want something and you can afford it, it's a really good time to support those small creators if you can. We're not saying do it because you have to, like,
Right.
your finances better than us, but most creators are going to be hurting a little bit here and there. So,
No, and honestly, the consumers are going to be hurting. And I agree with you. If you want to support somebody, support the small places. But honestly,
mhm.
play the games on your
Yep.
shelves. If it
Yep.
becomes unaffordable to continue in your hobby by buying, I mean, I'm going to be honest. This predates tariffs. I know a few people that have been playing role playing games for 40 years off of the same set of books they bought in the 80s or the 90s.
Hmm.
They have
Yeah.
literally bought 0 books because they found a game that they loved. They play it the way they play it, and they
Mhm.
they they haven't been keeping up with all the new editions and all that, but, I mean, play the games on your shelf.
Yeah.
Playing dead games is always a good idea. Playing games that small games, low production values. Also,
Mhm.
if you're looking to support, but if you do want to support new people, go out and look at the PDFs instead of buying physical
Yeah,
books potentially.
it's good advice.
You can still do some of that and get you can still support them and still get new games on the cheap if you just don't get physical
I
books.
think you could tell that all 3 of us, just looking at the camera backgrounds, all 3 of us appreciate the physical nature of
Yeah,
of our hobby.
Yeah.
But
but it's expensive.
but Brent's right, it's expensive, but supporting
Hmm.
them by buying digital copies of new products
Hmm.
Mhm.
is a good way to do it.
It's a good way to support them, and
Yeah,
usually the PDFs are cheaper than physical book. Well, they were cheaper than physical books in the first place. Now they'll probably be much cheaper than physical books. So,
Yeah.
if you want that new thing, just look for a cheaper way to obtain it, like a PDF.
So,
So,
but if you're just looking to try some stuff out, do we have some recommendations for you? So that this is so kind of to change gears onto, like the game, like if you want a game, and you have the book and you want to play and you're going to play your D&D campaign from the stuff that you purchased a year ago and you're on a 2-year, 3-year campaign, you may not even notice anything changes because it may have all come and gone by the time you go back to the gaming store to buy that next book. You never know. But the really cool part is that if you want to try new systems, and I thought this was fascinating, is that a lot of systems have put out system reference documents that if there's definitely categories of games that people, they're either free games that people just publish so that you can pick them up and play them. They may not have a lot of polish to them. They may be a bare bones set of rules. Like I think Reese's is
Yeah,
A lot of
pretty
Reese's
people like
plain.
is
Reese's.
Reese's is on a list of one of the ones that you have an article that we were reviewing.
Yeah, and I mean, Reese's is a free game, as far as I know. I haven't seen it charge for anything. It's 4 pages, but it's versatile enough that you can play the game, enjoy it with your friends, beer and pretzels, no extra investment involved. Maybe just printing the paper if you really cared. But there are also games that are pay what you want. There are some publishers that put out there that if you want to try the game and then come back and pay them money, go for it. I think I picked up, I in order to kind of check out that Alone in the Deep game from Mothership. I think it was pay what you want on itch, and then I went back and put money in the tip jar because I honestly thought the adventure ran really well, and it
Yeah.
looked really good. And I mean, that's nice that they put that type of effort and made it accessible for people so that, they could play the game if they wanted to. And then, of course, if you really enjoy it, you can just put that money in the tip jar. And if you have the means to, you could pay for it up front too. But you can also look at system reference documents. I think that most recently, the best system reference document and kind of website that I've seen for one is the Pathfinder Second Edition.
Mhm.
That was pretty. I mean, it has everything you want, and I believe they communicate with Paizo to make sure that it's all up to date with all the new stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a whole website where you can actually go and basically see pretty much all the rules. I don't. What does it omit though? There are some things that it does. It
it
does.
it doesn't talk about, as far as my understanding is, it doesn't talk about any of like the real deep setting material. So like you can't. I mean, you can get some basic stuff. Um, you can see like, and I think, this is kind of hard to explain, but you can see what is in this setting. You can get like a small blurb about it. You can find out where stuff is located in certain, magazines and stuff like that. But you can't like go, I want to play this adventure that is published and chargeable.
Right,
And they
because
don't have like,
you
right.
can copyright settings details, you can copyright
Hmm.
stuff like that, but you can't copyright systems. We've talked about that before, as far as I
Yep.
understand.
Yeah.
So that's why Pathfinder is similar to D&D, is because you can't
Hmm.
mechanics you
Yeah.
can't really. So if you need a rule set, if you just need a rule set and have your own, want to make your own world, like, yeah, SRD documents are good. Reese's is good. Any of those
Mhm.
general games are good for that.
If you just want
Yeah.
to try something new, a lot of these games have quick start
Hmm.
things with a small
Hmm.
scenario, and yeah, you're not getting exposed to
Yeah,
all of the
a
rules.
lot of free
But
quick starts out there. That's a
yeah,
really good idea if you want to. That way you can at least vet the product before you buy it. If you want to
exactly.
buy it or not buy
Yeah. Or not. I
Not
mean,
every game is for every person.
it.
yeah. So I mean, if I were to if and so like when we look at those kind of things, I honestly feel like, because there's definitely SRDs for Pathfinder, D&D, and stuff like that. But there's also a huge list of SRDs on the RPG subreddit. So there's basically, if you look at D20 base, it tells you that D&D 4E, it's got swords and wizardry, old school essentials, Osric pocket. And some of these are meaty SRDs. Like Osric is like 412 pages apparently. So
So
it's not
yeah, I mean,
it's not a light system by
if
any
you just
means.
want rules and you're not looking for a setting, you can go out there and
Mhm.
find a free set of rules. I mean, there's even people that aren't affiliated with the publisher or anything
Yeah.
and put out their own homebrew rules. Like, if
Mhm.
you want rules, if you need rules for a game, you can do that. And then settings and stuff like that, like you can either make it up, or I'm sure you can find some references for people's
Mhm.
settings that you can graft. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's ways to game without
Mhm.
putting a
Oh
big
yeah.
hole in your pocket.
We didn't even talk about, thrift stores and used bookstores. A lot of them focus on D&D type products, stuff that they can
Yeah.
move, but there
Or
are a
stuff that
lot
they
of
just
book there
give.
are a lot of books out there. you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
that have already been
Although
published.
I have not actually seen any RPG books in a thrift store here, but I do have a game store that actually likes to get old books. So like I picked up Spirit of the Century, from Evil Hat or whatever it is, just
Oh,
because
that's interesting. That's cool.
they had a copy of it there, and they were like, "Oh, the person just never played it," and I was like, "Well, now it can go on my shelf, and maybe I'll never, you know,
Two for
use the
two,
books."
two owners,
At least
no
two for
place.
two. Who knows? Who knows? But actually, I was curious. Like Iron Sworn is also a fully free game that has a lot of people that have liked it quite a bit. Have you guys played it or looked at it at all, Brent? I
I
thought.
have not.
I
I've heard
did a
of it.
little bit with their sci-fi setting. Somebody was going to run one. It never took off, but it's pretty interesting. Again, it's a Ironsworn is interesting because it's a system, not necessarily a setting. So that's
Hmm.
why its rules are out there. Like basically, you roll for the whole setting. Like you build the setting, kind of
Oh,
like
nice.
Fabula Ultima. So it's more like it's a collection of rules, not necessarily a setting. I think they have a setting, but that's not really where the game started. So
Mm, yeah,
Nice.
because I feel like that's like the game night is like so easy to do, and I'm honestly we've been pretty successful with all the little tiny beer and pretzel games that we've done that haven't really um, cost anything, like Roll for Shoes. That was it called, Roll for Shoes?
Roll for shoes.
mhm,
I had a
Reese's.
lot of fun when we did Cocaine Owlbear.
mhm.
Okay, Albert.
I mean,
Yeah,
those aren't like campaign games, but yeah, they were pretty
No,
fun.
no, no. They're more one-shotty type things, but there are a lot of things out there. Like if you go on Itch and drive through, there's
That's true. If you did one shot games, you could probably do one shot games for the rest of your life if you wanted that sort of game night.
you could. You could
there
just
are a
like, well,
lot
what
of
are we playing today?
creative people out there.
Honey Heist, Cocaine Bear,
The familiar one
Roll
that
for Shoes.
I think Grant Hewitt has the familiar one where you're all familiars and your witch has been taken or
Yep.
killed or
Mhm.
something like that. Um, he has got some really creative games out there. We'll see. I mean, honestly, it's like what I think what people may need to just I think they'll take a step back. I don't know if I'm predicting as much doom and gloom at this point as other people, other than people if they just close up their wallets. Like, because I think the saddest part about all this kind of stuff is that there's some creative person that has a really great idea that even may not necessarily make it to the big time, but it would be nice if they got it out there.
I worry about some of the Kickstarters that I've supported, and I think it'll limit Kickstarters in the future. I think Kickstarters are going to have a little harder go of it.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, some of the independent people, like I know I mentioned the Orpheus Protocol before, and how it took
Hmm.
me so long to get. Well, it was production. It was like overseas production and shipping. There was a problem, which is what took him so long. I mean, it was through the years that we do not speak of the plague, um, but also like just that sort of thing can the small press that can really make a big impact, like you said, because
Yeah.
there's already sunk costs that they've already received, and the worst situation I've heard of is the one that Dungeon Craft talked about, where it's like, oh, your books are on the way over here, and now you have to pay an extra $10,000 for them when they hit the harbor, like
Do you accept Visa?
unexpectedly. Yeah, exactly, just unexpectedly. And then, like he said, and in his video, he said, and then it's not like they hold the product; they just destroy it if you can't pay for it. They just destroy it.
Wow.
So, like that's got to be scary for companies. So,
Well,
That's
imagine,
but
because I mean,
terrifying.
the worst part is you're like, I don't have any money right now, and it's in a container coming from wherever. I mean, it's not like you can be like, turn the ship around or
mhm.
don't unload that one.
Yep,
Like,
exactly. I just so I understand why there's a lot of fear, but I don't I think it's just another obstacle to get past and it'll be fine.
yeah. Well, admittedly,
Hopefully it's
these
a
are
lot
some
of
people's livelihoods, so I
People,
can see
yeah,
yeah,
why they'd be scared.
scared. People will find a way.
they
So,
will.
Yeah.
Hopefully it is a short-term disruption and not a longer-term
Mhm.
disruption.
Yeah.
hopefully
I
your
mean,
alien books aren't in jeopardy.
so I didn't have a chance to watch it, but they were doing a live stream today talking about the tariffs, and I feel like depending on how like there's probably something that's going to happen there, but I'll have to see what their press release and everything like that says, because obviously a campaign that happens that has a huge impact like that could really be less fun for them. But I don't think they would print anything in China. I don't think. And I think that's the one that's the largest one, because I think since they're an EU adjacent kind of place, I think they would probably just print it over in like Lithuania or one of those
Probably,
friendly
but
places.
I
Or maybe
mean,
they print it in
The
Canada.
tariffs are lower, yes.
yes, the tariffs are present though, not lower, but present. So who knows? But yeah,
Present. Present.
exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see.
They're
I mean, I
present,
feel
not a
like
gift.
yeah, and I feel like it sucks, but I think that the cool part about this hobby is that all it really takes is your imaginations, and if you want to apply rule to it, then you can, and you can start from there. So, I think we're we're not, like I said, we're not going to probably talk about this ever again unless something really big happens, like the sky actually does fall. But we'll keep that for another episode. But I think next time we're going to be talking about we're going to dive into Robin Law's. What is it called? Robin's
Robin laws of
laws
good game
of
mastering.
it's Robin's laws of good game mastering.
Yes.
And so because it's this has been spoken of as basically a title that is every game master should read it kind of thing. It's from the early 2000s, but it kind of summarized what he felt every game master should prioritize and good advice and everything like that. And so we'll take a look and see how it holds up. Probably pretty good. He's a pretty solid game designer and everything. Probably has great advice. And so we'll be presenting that next week, our thoughts, kind of our review of it. And so if you guys want to catch us next week on it.
And we'll be streaming one day, the continuation of Castles and Crusades.
Mm-hmm. We'll be continuing
Yeah.
that. So hopefully we do it justice for those watchers of the system that have played it. Or if we're not doing it justice, please let us know how we're fucking it up.
Correct.
So I can correct it before
How
Monday.
Mike is fucking it up. Let's just
I'd like to say this is a team effort. How we're all fucking this up, not just me.
I don't know how we'd screw up the role playing part.
Go team.
Sorry, Mike, but you can't have dwarves in the same place that goblins are at. That just doesn't work.
Well, I mean, we are breaking the dwarves hate orcs rule, kind of.
Yeah.
Ish.
There's a suspension of belief that, like, for some reason, you guys are mostly okay with each other.
Necessity, really, is what it is.
Yeah, necessity. How does it go? Strange bedfellows.
Yeah, necessity breeds strange bedfellows. Yes.
Yeah,
and that's fine. I mean, we could have done a little bit more diving into like how you guys liked each other or whatnot, but I assume it was some prison incident which drew you more closely together.
I assume we just need to get out of the prison. That's really a good enough excuse for me.
And then basically you were like, as soon as we're out of here, this guy,
we'll go our separate ways then, maybe, but we'll see what happens.
While you're trying to get out of prison, while you're trying to engineer the escape,
correct,
complete the coffin run in our case.
Yes.
Yeah. So join us Monday night if you're interested in watching us play the game. Also, we like recommendations for games. So if you want to recommend something, for us to play our next game time, we just like having people hang out with us at the table. So with that, Jeff, how do people get in touch with us?
You look for @RollWise on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or you email us. We are rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And thank you everybody for joining us. We do appreciate having you here. Roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
See you.
Thanks.